Pokémon Horizons Episode 83 may have just flipped everything we knew about Lucius vs Gibeon on its head. It challenged the idea of a singular truth, proving that every conflict, including the one at Rakua, has multiple perspectives. This episode had huge plot reveals left, right and centre, so let's talk about it right here, right now. Really quickly though, I have a bit of a sore throat, so if I sound a little bit different in this video, then that explains it. Anyway, let's dive into the review. The episode opens with Gibeon informing the explorers that the Rising Voltaclers have captured the Black Rayquaza and that they're en route to the Rakua Paradise. Coral and Sidian want to bring Amethio along to Rakua because of his strength as a fighter, but Spinel immediately shuts that idea down. It's interesting to see Coral and Sidian still slightly siding with Amethio. I'm curious to see where this dynamic will lead. Meanwhile, our heroes are following Rayquaza to Rakua. Molly then gets an incredible moment to shine, using her scientific and medical expertise to theorize on the nature of Rakurium. She thinks that Rakurium works by continuously regenerating and replacing body cells in humans, Pokemon and plants, effectively stopping them from dying and granting them eternal life. And yeah, this obviously ties into the nickname of Rakurium as the Eternal Blessing. It gives you the blessing of living forever. And that explains how Gibeon and possibly even Lucius have survived for over 100 years. I love that Molly was the one to piece this together. It fits perfectly with her role as the medical expert. So now they're thinking Gibeon's supply of Rakurium must be running out, threatening his immortality, and thus explaining why he needs to reach Rakua. All of this also sets up a compelling contrast. While the adults are wary of what lies ahead, thinking about the dangers Rakua and the explorers could bring, the kids on the other hand are thrilled and excited about the thoughts of following in Lucius's footsteps. That moment really highlights the difference between youthful excitement and the cautious wisdom that comes with experience. At the same time, Gibeon summons Spinel and Agate, confirming our theories even further. The explorers need Rakurium to sustain themselves for centuries to come. The Eternal Blessing is about living eternally. I can't get over how wild this storyline is, dude. It feels so much more like something out of a high-stakes anime rather than what we'd expect from Pokemon. I'm living for it, man. Over at the Exceed Company headquarters, Conia and Zir follow Amethio to Spinel's lab, but as they investigate Rakurium, they get caught by Spinel's guards and locked inside a warehouse. And it's really funny seeing the three of them in a warehouse again. It kinda feels like a throwback to episode 3 where they were in a warehouse after kidnapping Sprigatito, but in a surprising turn, Hamber, the explorer's second-in-command, arrives and frees them. It turns out he's still secretly allied with Amethio, giving them all their Pokemon back. This cute little reunion really showcased how much these three love their Pokemon, and to me that says everything I need to know about the goodness of their characters. You love to see it, man. Now that they're free, Amethio demands answers from Hamber. He wants to know the full truth about Gibeon, Rakua, and the Rakurium. But what's fascinating here is Amethio's motivation. He doesn't want to work against his grandfather. He still wants to help his grandfather. And that is what makes Amethio's arc so compelling to me. A lot of people expected an immediate redemption for Amethio, but I love that it's being handled as a slow burn. After all, from Amethio's perspective, it wasn't Gibeon who betrayed him, it was Spinel. Gibeon only fired him because Spinel manipulated the situation. Amethio still believes in his grandfather and everything he's worked for, and that makes total sense considering Amethio's dedicated his entire life to Gibeon. I really love the realism of this approach, man. It wouldn't feel right for Amethio to instantly turn against Gibeon. His loyalty is too deeply ingrained, but when he sees what's really happening in Rakua, when he sees that Gibeon is evil, then I'm certain we're going to witness a major, powerful turning point for his character. Amethio, Conia and Zir head to Amethio's family mansion, and wow, this place is massive. Conia and Zir are just as blown away as I am. But the best part by far is the Sir Duck at the front door. And make it double, dude. This really made my entire day. Sirfetch'd is one of my favourite Pokemon ever, and I miss Ash's Sirfetch'd so much. So seeing two of them guarding the fort is so awesome. The inside of the mansion is feeling very Resident Evil 1, which, by the way, is like my favourite game ever, so I love that. And there's a huge painting of a woman on the wall who Amethio reveals is his mother, but tragically she passed away in a car crash when Amethio was really young. Man, it's honestly crazy how casual Pokemon Horizons is when it comes to discussing such dark themes. The storytelling feels so mature and like it's aimed at a slightly older demographic. I love that. I feel so awful for Amethio though. I can't even begin to imagine the pain of losing your mother so young. And I'm guessing that since Amethio's mother had white hair like Gibeon does, that she's actually Gibeon's biological child. She's Gibeon's daughter, and that would make Amethio's father crave Gibeon's son-in-law. That adds such an interesting new dynamic to that entire family. I wonder if part of the reason for Gibeon's obsession with Rakurium Rakurium is because of how it could have saved his daughter from death back then. I can understand how losing a daughter and knowing the power to save her is just out of your reach could drive any man to any extreme. After all, if Gibeon had more Rakurium, then maybe his daughter could have had eternal life too, rather than tragically dying so young. That's so heavy but so compelling of a motivation if true. And it would also explain why Gibeon is so angry at Crave for giving up, since he feels that Crave would owe it to his late wife to keep trying. Shortly later, Hamber reveals to Amethio that Lucius and Gibeon reached Rakua 100 years ago, but they fought over what to do with the Rakurium. Gibeon had aspirations to use the power of Rakurium, and interestingly, Hamber frames it in a way that implies Gibeon's aspirations and intentions were positive, until Lucius and Gibeon's Zygarde betrayed him to stop the Rakurium. It's really interesting that Hamber is framing this in a totally different light to what we heard from Rystal. Honestly, actually, it's more than interesting. It's genius. Seeing both sides of the conflict adds so much depth to the story. It makes the battle over Rakua 100 years ago feel so much more complex. From the explorer's perspective, Lucius was the villain. He was the one who stopped Gibeon from using Rakurium for greater purposes. They don't necessarily know that Gibeon was using it for something darker. This explains so much about why the explorers remain loyal to Gibeon. If they genuinely believed what Gibeon told them, that Lucius was the real villain who denied the world of that power, then of course they'd keep fighting for Gibeon's cause. And I love that, man. I love it when the villains aren't just completely inherently evil. The storytelling can be so much better if the villains believe they're in the right. But now I'm gonna need you all to hear me out. The absolute craziest part to me is that there's a genuine real possibility that the truth isn't as black and white as we assumed. We're all blindly trusting the stories we've heard about Lucius being good and Gibeon being bad, but this episode is really raising the question of how do we know that's the truth? What if Lucius wasn't a perfect hero and Gibeon wasn't a total villain? What if the truth is somewhere between the two extreme perspectives we've seen? The fact that Zygarde itself was split on the matter is huge. Zygarde is literally the Pokemon whose purpose is to protect and balance the world. But half of the Zygarde cells sided with Lucius and the other half sided with Gibeon. If Gibeon was truly 100% evil and irredeemable, then wouldn't all of Zygarde's cells have opposed him? The fact that that didn't happen really suggests there's way more ambiguity to this conflict that we don't know of in my opinion. I'm sure all of this will be answered in the upcoming story arc, and taking the obvious route of Lucius being the perfect hero and Gibeon being the evil villain, that would definitely be the easiest story to tell, but Horizons has repeatedly impressed us with its writing and storytelling, so I really hope it's more complex than that, dude. I love the idea of Lucius being flawed, and then Gibeon, despite being the antagonist, not being as 100% inherently evil as we're led to believe. Hamber then gives a breakdown on how Zygarde works, explaining its cores and cells, and this has got me theorizing like crazy. At the beginning of the episode, we learnt that Rakurium regenerates and replaces body cells, and now the main Pokemon of the villain is a being composed of body cell Pokemon? There's gotta be a connection, man. And then Hamber drops another bombshell. He suddenly reveals one of Gibeon's Zygarde cells from his pocket, but this one, for some reason, really likes him and has grown attached to him. And this sparks so many questions. After all, it's Zygarde cores that act as the brain. Zygarde cores are the ones that can speak and think and act independently, like Squishy in the X and Y anime. But Zygarde cells? They're meant to be just mindless body components to monitor the environment. They're not meant to have independent thought. So the fact that this one specific Zygarde cell can feel emotions and form a bond with Hamber? That's crazy, man. That has got to mean something, and I can't wait to see where it leads. So Gibeon escaped Rakua back then with a small sample of Rakurium, and he created the Exceed Company to research it further, and then we get some Hamber backstory. Hamber used to be an adventurer himself, but then Gibeon found him and guided him, giving him a new path. So that's why Hamber follows Gibeon, out of gratitude and respect. Hamber trained Amethio, Agate, Coral, and Sidian for the explorers, but interestingly, he says he never trained Spinel. Spinel was chosen specifically by Gibeon. Amethio theorizes that Spinel plans to betray Gibeon and steal the Rakurium at the Rakua Paradise, so Amethio wants to stop Spinel from doing that. We then see some photos from Amethio's childhood. We see baby Amethio with his mother and father, a toddler Amethio with his mother on a boat, and they look so happy and peaceful, man. But then the next set of pictures tell a totally different story. These photos are clearly from after his mother passed away. You can see it in his expression. He looks sad, lost, incomplete. His mother is nowhere to be seen. But what matters most is that Hamber and Charcadet are standing by his side even back then. And this brings us to the realization that Hamber and Ceruledge have been Amethio's true family all along. This really recontextualizes Amethio's character for me. Hamber wasn't just a mentor, he was Amethio's father figure. And Ceruledge wasn't just a Pokemon, he was Amethio's lifelong companion, his sibling. They were there for him when his mother passed away and his father neglected him. And that's so incredibly sweet, it really makes me love these three characters even more. And with that in mind, Amethio makes his declaration. He's going to the Rakua Paradise. He plans to carry on his grandfather's will, but he does not intend on fighting for his grandfather as an explorer. He kind of has his own path now, and this feels like such a huge moment for his character, one that will inevitably eventually lead to true redemption. Conia, Zir, and Ceruledge are determined to stay by Amethio's side, and they all begin heading to Rakua together. Man, I love Team Amethio, they're so awesome. Such a cool little found family, you know? Meanwhile, our heroes are approaching the Rakua Paradise, finally. But Aula tells them quite passionately that they need to land their airship at the nearby Kamuri town, because they won't be able to reach Rakua by air. So they land and plan to travel the rest of the way by foot. But meanwhile, deep in Rakua, the giant Rakurium crystal in the center begins sparkling mysteriously. And that's where the episode ended. So I've yapped tons throughout the review about my thoughts on the episode, and my throat is really killing me and I'm struggling to get my words out at this point, so I'll keep this real brief at the end. This episode was dope, dude. It was definitely more of a storytelling, dialogue-heavy plot episode, rather than an action one, but man, it was so necessary. We needed to see everything from Amethio's perspective to truly set up his redemption, and to set up the upcoming Rakua arc. And seeing Gibeon's alternate story about what happened 100 years ago, that really opens up the door to so many new questions and theories about what the truth is. It adds such a great complexity to the story. I also really loved the focus on Conia and Zir here. They've been so underutilized in Horizons, so it was great to see them get some spotlight now. And finally finding out about Amethio's childhood and his found family was so touching. Let me know your thoughts on this episode below, and like and subscribe if you enjoyed the review. Join our Discord server and follow me on Twitch too using the links in the description. And on that note, thank you all so much for watching, and best wishes until we meet again!